Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to part 3 of my Rook build series. So I wanted to dedicate a full video on belts. So hopefully we'll be able to squeeze in the gantry belts and also the Z belt on this video. It might be a little bit hard to see, it's a little bit tricky to get the perspective, but I'll try to explain as much as I can as I'm routing the belts here. So I've got my belts here from my Fabreeko kit, and generally what I like to do is I like to kind of fake run the belts on the outside and then cut my first length. So we're going to start with the bottom belt loop first. I have my belt carriage on here and I've installed my linear rail. Linear rail is just installed with 4 M3x12s. I'm just using 2 here, it's totally fine. And then a nut on the back. So I've cleaned and lubricated my rail, M3x12s to secure the rail to the Y carriage, and then I've installed my belt carriage here for the rookery, and that's M3x6. So I've left it loose here so I can hopefully feed the belt through here. Sometimes this can be a bit tricky, but it's loose enough here I was able to get it through. You want to leave yourself a generous amount of belt here because we're going to be looping it back around. We should have plenty of extra, so it's okay to actually have more than you need here. I'll try and spin this so you can see a bit better. So I've got quite a bit of extra belt you can hopefully see here. And then for my lower belt loop, I'm going to go around this bottom pulley here and around my motor. Okay? So like I say, I'm actually going to do this kind of loose outside. I'm just going to get my belts in the right orientation here. So what I like to do is I'll just pretend to route the belt how I'm going to route the lower belt. So left-hand side, you start going around your motor. We're going to go around the idler towers. And then because this lower belt went around the motor, I know that it's going to just go straight onto the belt carriage from here. So this is kind of our belt routing. Of course my hands are in the way, but you can kind of visually see, and you'll be able to see when we actually run it. So I'm not running it through the pulleys yet. I'm just trying to get a very basic length. And then what I'll do is I'll give myself a little bit of extra and I'm going to cut this. This is the dirty way of getting your belt sizes. Normally you would have like the exact length you need and cut it. I've always found this method to work fine. So now I can actually run my length that I've cut correctly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slide it through the back. Make sure my belt orientation is correct so the teeth are facing forward. We're going to go around my pulley. And it's going to go straight along right to the front idler tower. And we can easily just feed this through here. There's lots of holes, so it's easy to feed this through the idler tower. Make sure that our orientation is correct. So I'm not pulling on this really tight, but we can see here. Let's lower this down to the lower belt and get this down. So this is we started on the left-hand side. This is our lower belt loop. Don't worry about the height of the pulleys or anything yet. We're just kind of getting this belt ran through all the pulleys first. We're going to go through this idler tower now. And then we're going to go around this bottom pulley here on the outside. Make sure the belt's down. And then we're going to feed this belt through the belt. And I've definitely got a lot of excess here, but that's okay. So you can actually get an idea on how this lower belt loop is. We can see it goes around the pulley here around the back motor, all the way on the outside, around our idler towers, around this right-hand side lower pulley, and then right to the belt carriage. Hopefully that'll show up fine on camera, but... So that is our bottom belt loop. Next, we can take the rest of our GT2 belt, reposition this a bit better, and then we are going to actually run the top loop now. So again, we're going to feed the belt loop through the back and hopefully get it to come out the front of our belt carriage. It definitely is easier if you take the belt carriage off the linear rail, but we'll see if we can feed it through. Might not be able to here, but we'll see. Trying to do this in one take so you can see a bit better. Yeah, this is probably gonna just be a bit tricky. Sometimes you can use your fingers and just put a little bend in the belt and squeeze it together, and that little curve will help get it through. There we go. So we're gonna pull that through. Again, will give us a little bit extra length. And then we're going to pretend to run the belts. So in this case, the top left-hand side, we're going around this pulley here, straight to the front. Go around this idler. We're going around the motor this time on the right-hand side. And then we are gonna go around this pulley and then to our belt loop. And then I'm gonna give myself a little bit of extra. So we'll cut it right about here. Take our excess. We definitely have more than enough for the Z. There's generous amount of belt included in the Fabreeko kit, so that's excellent. Generally, when I build a custom 3D printer, I'll order 6 meters of belt, and that way you always have extras. So we're gonna feed our belt around this pulley, again on the outside. And this will even make more sense when you physically have the printer in front of you. It seems a little bit hard to wrap your head around once, if you're just trying to like do this kind of imaginary, but once you have a printer in front of you, it's definitely much easier. So we're gonna feed our belt through the front idler towers, making sure our belt orientation is correct. Feed this through. There we go. And then this one goes around our right motor. And it's going to feed through the back of this Y carriage. And then we're going to see if we can now feed it through the front. Here, I'm just going to turn this slightly so I can get a better view at this. Again, we'll try to pinch this a little bit so that it can kind of curve the belt a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. And we'll pull that somewhat tight so we can get a good idea here of the belts. So the pulleys are not at their correct heights yet, and that's pretty obvious. You can see the belts are kind of all weird looking as far as their actual heights and whatnot, but hopefully you can kind of see how the belts are actually ran now. It's actually quite straightforward. Like I say, once you have the printer in person, it's pretty easy to actually see how the belts are ran. Now, what we need to do is you have a couple options here. We can use zip ties to actually clamp the belts down, that type of thing. Or on Printables, there is a mod by Kyle Davis, which is a belt clamp. So to use that, we actually need to take our belts back out and slide this clamp on first. So I'm going to be using the clamp method. So I'm just going to take the ends of my belts out of the carriage. It won't undo any of the work we've done. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to actually slide on the clamp on both of my belts here. We'll slide it right back to the back here. And then I can feed my belts back into this carriage. Luckily, they seem to be cooperating with me. There we go. And then we need to do the same for the other side. So you're going to have 2 of these belt clamps if you're using the clamp method. So I'm just going to pull out my belts from this side of the carriage and we'll slide our clamp on. The belt clamp, this is, of course, I have it set on the mods collection on Printables. So if you just look at the mods collection on Printables, you will see this clamp. Gotta get my right belt on top and right one on the bottom here. So we can see we have our clamp here now on the right hand side. And then let's see if this will cooperate once more here for this. There we go. Excellent. Okay. So then we can pull these a little bit tight here. Just make sure everything's kind of lined up as far as you can see. I've already messed up here, so I'm going to include this. I accidentally didn't quite run this through the idler tower. Clearly I wasn't paying attention there. Very easy to fix right now, so that's what we're going to do. So we'll just slip that out and we'll route that on the inside like it's supposed to be. That'll probably work a lot better. Good thing I checked that. And then we're going to be pulling these tight now, or relatively. Okay. Everything's looking good here. Let's just get the belt over top the pulley. So you can see we have a lot of excess belt. We don't need that much belt. We'll cut that once we slide it over once we slide the clamp over. So basically you're going to just pinch the belt together and then you're going to slide the clamp over top. And what the clamp does is it actually locks in the teeth with each other so that the belt can't slip. These belts are pretty long. I should have cut them, but we got it. So you can see here we can slide the clamp all the way to the end. And now I can go ahead and cut the excess off of these. I'm not going to cut it really, really close. I still want a little bit left over just in case. So hopefully you can see there the length. We haven't tensioned anything yet, so we'll just leave that like that. We'll slide this over. I definitely know that this is going to be too long, so we're gonna try to pre-cut these a little bit so they're not so long. It's easiest if you cut these to the same length. So in my method, there's definitely a lot of waste of belt. Choose whatever method you want if you want to measure. I've found there's always extras So this method seems to work just fine. Try to get these relatively tight. And then we're going to slide the clamp over top, just like so. And there we go. And then I'm going to trim these once more. Just make sure you don't cut both. You're only cutting the front excess. That would definitely not be good if you cut both. There we go. And I will tighten these down. So our belt carriage is no longer loose. Again, these are M3 by 6. So make sure this is nice and secure. And there we go. Our gantry belts are ran. Our pulley heights are not correct yet. We can see that this pulley is too high. So if I grab my other Allen key here, we can do a basic height adjustment. You can always fine tune this as you go once you have the belts a little bit more tight, but it's better when you do this loose. So I'm just eyeballing it, trying to make sure that these are parallel. And that looks pretty good to me. We'll lock this in here. Don't want to strip these Allen keys, so don't go crazy. Or strip the set screw. That's much nicer there. And then if we flip this over on the other side, we can see that this is not too bad. It could go a little higher though. So we're gonna just loosen this up. And we'll just raise that just ever so slightly. And then we'll lock these in a little bit better. All right, and then what we're gonna do is we can now tension these. Now I generally tension by feel. I'll kind of just make these pretty taut. And you wanna make sure that this is parallel. So I can see here I have a little bit of room for this to come back. So I'm gonna tension this side first. We're gonna lock this in. I'm only using 2 bolts right now, but you can use 4 or 2 at the time you do this. So the belts are still going to be loose because we've only done one side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually just put a little bit of tension on this, and I'm going to lock down the bolts, and I'm going to feel how tight the belts are. Usually I'll check the front here. I can feel these are nice and tight. They kind of sound like a little bit like a guitar. I can move my gantry and it's moving well. Yeah, very, very nice and clean movement. I don't feel anything weird. And we can see the belts look quite nice. You can actually look at the belt straight on and it looks like I probably need to lower this pulley a little bit. So there's a little bit of fine tuning that you need to do with the gantry belts, but that's kind of how I run the gantry. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to mount my Z motor and we'll run the Z belt loop here in just a second. All right, so we're going to mount our Z motor now. You want to make sure that your connector is pointing to either side. You don't want to point it downward. There's not enough room to plug it in if you do it that way. We're going to take some M3 by 10s and we are going to just put this in there just loosely. It does not need to be snug because again we're going to tension this. Actually, before we do this, I always forget this step on the Rook. We need to put an M3 nut in the bottom for our tensioning screw. So we're going to take an M3 and we will take a M3 by 12 for now, and what we're going to do is we're going to just hold this M3 nut in its capted spot here, and we'll just tighten it down so that it pulls it into the plastic part. Definitely can't install this after, so we want to install this right now. And I'll show you the tensioning nut once we have the motor mounted. So we're just, see if I can get a better angle for you guys. You can see the M3 nut there that we're just driving through, using the M3 bolt to actually suck the nut into the plastic. That way it'll stay in place. And then we're going to take the screw out. And you don't need to take it completely out. We're just going to unscrew it until it's flush so that the motor can sit at the top. So there we go. So don't forget that step. I usually always end up forgetting that. Now we can mount our motor with our M3x10s. Again, just for the sake of the video, I'm just going to do 2 M3x10s to mount the motor. I definitely recommend you use 4. These motors are responsible for locking the motor in place once you tension it. We'll see if I can actually do this in this orientation. There we go. All right, so we have our motor is loose. I'll just kind of tighten up the M3 bolts just a little bit. So we can still slide our motor up and down so we can tension it. So now it's time to actually install the Z idler. So this is the M5 hole at the back. We're going to take our final 2 F695 bearings. And we're going to take 1 precision shim. The precision shim goes up against the plastic, and then your bearings go on, and then your M5 bolt goes through. So you will have an M5 bolt left over in your kit. My bolts are all scattered about, but take this and we're just going to mount it in the back hole here. I'm just going to grab my other Allen here and we'll tighten that bolt on. And I'll show you how that looks in just a second here. You don't want to tighten this crazy tight. You want the bearing to still spin freely. So that's probably good there. So we can see we have our F695 bearing idler there for the Z. So it is now time to run the belt for Z. So the actual bed frame has 2 plastic ledges that you're going to be looping the belt through and zip tying. So I'll demonstrate that. You want to make sure that your teeth are facing inward, okay? It's kind of hard to show here, but basically what we're doing is we're going to actually loop the belt around these plastic parts on the bed frame, and I'll show you more up close look once I get this first one through here. It's great we have a manual now, because this kind of step, which is a little bit tricky to show on camera, it's easy to see in the manual now. But okay, so I am going to use a zip tie here, and I'm going to actually zip tie the belt around this plastic ledge. So let me get this tight, and then I'll zip tie it, and then I'll see if I can show you a better camera view on this. So it's very difficult to show on camera, but I've just looped the belt around the plastic ledge here and zip tied it. And then this is going to go around my idler. And I'm going to just try to cut this to the correct length. So the other end of the belt feeds straight through. So just feed that all the way through. Again, we'll try to make it the correct orientation. The teeth are facing each other. So we can see here our belt goes around like that, and it goes straight through the bed frame. Maybe it's even better to show on the back here. This belt is now going to continue on through the bottom frame. Pass this through here. We're going to take our idler, or our pulley I should say, and let's install it in the motor right now. We'll adjust the distance later. Generally, I believe if you get the pulley flush with the motor shaft, it's pretty close, but we'll check that. So you're going to take the other end of the belt and it's going to loop around this motor. I'm just going to cut this now. So again, I'm going to just kind of fake route it here, and I'm going to cut off right here. This is going to give me lots of excess, but that's fine. So we're going to loop around the motor, and then there's a ledge, a plastic ledge right here. We're going to feed the motor, or feed the belt around it. Just use a Allen or something to poke the belt through so that it loops. I actually have enough slack here. I'm just going to pass it through and then go right back through. And there we go. And I'm going to just pull this tight, and then I will zip tie it really quickly here. All right. So there you can kind of see the belt loop. I've zip tied it right here. So I just took the belt, I went around the little plastic ledge here, zip tied it. Same thing with the top. I went around the little plastic ledge and I zip tied it on one side. The other side, the belt goes all the way through. And now you can see at the bottom there is a little black M3 screw right here. We can now turn this and it will tension our belt. So we just turn it down and it's going to pull the belt nice and tight. You want the belt to be relatively tight. You don't want your bed to be wobbling because the belt is too loose. So we're going to get it pretty tight here. That's looking pretty good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lock in the 4 M3 bolts. And that is how you run the belts on a Rook. Relatively straightforward. Like I say, it's a little easier to visualize once you have the printer in front of you. So we can see our belt is nice and tight. I can actually grab the belt and I can move the bed up and down. It moves quite nicely. And we're basically ready to mount the bed and then do some wiring, it looks like. So I'm going to leave the video here. It's probably already a little bit long. And in the next part, we're actually going to do the wiring. Thanks again everyone for watching, and stay tuned for more Rook videos.